And welcome back to the Financially Simple Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Goodbread, and it is a beautiful day in East Tennessee. I got to tell you, friends, I am so excited, more excited than ever, to talk to a guest. I have joining me today Miss Sarah Alexander. How are you, Sarah?
I'm doing well, Justin. Thank you. How are you?
Too blessed to be depressed on this beautiful East Tennessee day. I got to tell you this, Sarah. I would love to be in the garden at this point. As you may know, I have this garden. I share it out on the social media world. And Sarah, I've accomplished something this year. I think, unless the raccoons kill me, I think I've got growing corn on Rocky Top. I think I have corn growing. Okay. So you know the song, right?
Yeah, I do.
It's this annoying song. I'm a bulldog, so it's an annoying song that every year I have to listen to. I'm assuming that maybe you're a volunteer fan here in East Tennessee.
I am. Alumni.
Yeah, so they play this song here. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, this is a song that says, corn don't grow at all on Rocky Top. The ground's too rocky by far. And I'm actually proving that wrong this year, Sarah. I've got corn growing, so I think I'd like to be in the garden. Have you ever grown corn or have a garden for yourself?
Absolutely. We actually have a very large garden in our backyard, and we too have grown corn in the past and have had that ransacked by the critters, the raccoons and the deer. So good luck to you on that.
You know what? I'm going to try to outsmart them this year. So here's what I did, Sarah. I put 18 rows, 100-foot long of corn. And I said, if I get one ear of corn out of the whole garden, it's been a success. So we're going to see if I can feed enough critters to keep them out of the corn, turn the dogs loose. But that's not why we're here today. So friends, Sarah is the owner. She's also a consultant of Results HR. Sarah, tell me a little bit about what Results HR is and who you guys typically serve.
Sure, absolutely. So Results HR was founded on the belief that managing the people side of your business doesn't have to be hard. What we found was that business owners typically struggle with the people side of their business simply because they don't have the expertise or the time to really deal with the human resource of their business. So what we do at Results HR is strategically partner with our clients to provide that critical expertise to help them minimize risk, to improve and develop policy and procedure, manage their workforce and lead teams, which in turn gives them back more of their time that they can focus their efforts on strengthening and growing their business. We are serving small, family-owned and entrepreneurial-style businesses here in the Knoxville area.
Sarah, you know, one of the things we teach here on our websites and our podcast is that the people component is one of those things which drive up the value of the business. And friends, you may remember that from the value growth system that we did, the series that we did talking about, you have planning and leadership, sales and marketing, people, there's the side that Sarah deals with, people and operations, and finance and legal or risk management. You know, Sarah, you actually kind of touch into both those areas of risk management and the people side. So friends, what we want to do today is we want to talk about how HR was pre-COVID, because COVID's kind of it's kind of rocked our world. You know, it's kicked us in the teeth a couple of times. I've been kicked in the teeth one time by a mule. It didn't feel good. So it's like getting kicked in the face by a mule. Okay. It just doesn't feel good. COVID did that to us. So we want to talk about pre-COVID. What are we dealing with now? Kind of toward maybe some would say the end of COVID, or maybe some would argue the middle of COVID, and then what the future kind of looks like. So that's kind of what Sarah and I want to talk through today to help us business owner realize the importance of HR. We obviously want to attract a high quality team. That's what we're after. But we want to have a high quality team that's all facing the same direction, as I preached about many times on the show. But then whenever someone gets a little squirrely, a little sideways, or maybe the values change in the company, how that you can also protect your company from issues that arise from HR. So that's the kind of the goal that we want to deal with today. So Sarah, with that sort of a backdrop, how would you describe the HR world pre-COVID?
I would describe the HR world pre-COVID as, a resource within the company, but maybe not seen as a critical resource within a lot of companies, in that sometimes HR gets a seat at the table for some meetings, but not all. And thus, we engage HR as needed when times of crisis, right?
So, I got to tell you, Sarah, whenever I've had several businesses over my career, I've worked with hundreds of business owners in my career. And I think I can echo the sentiment that HR is often not even invited to the table. especially us entrepreneurs, we like want to charge hell with a water pistol. And it's like, let's figure out where we're going to be, and then we'll pick up the pieces behind us and we leave a wake of destruction in our path many times. But I got to tell you, a couple of years ago, I came about an HR individual who said, man, you need to have employment agreements. You need to have a handbook. You need to have job descriptions. You have an organizational chart. And this was long before I ever entered into the world of value growth, actually showing how those things actually add value to the company. So if we were talking about pre-COVID, and I had you quote at the table, so to speak, using that vernacular, right? Mm-hmm. I have you at the planning table with the business owner and all the other important areas of the business. What would you say are the key components that the business should have or should had pre-COVID 2009 or pre-COVID-19, which somehow is COVID-19 2020? I don't know. What would you say would have been in the mix beforehand?
What should have been, or what was?
What should? Yeah. Well, that's yeah. I mean, for small business owners, we're all just got to chuckle there because what should have been there is probably a lot of stuff, but what reality was is nothing. So let's go back to the should. What should an idealistic business, in the terms of documentation, in the terms of policies, what should we have in place for most businesses?
So, so the basics. Starting from the top, I firmly believe that every business, no matter what size, if they have employees, should have some type of employee handbook. It really is what I call playbook. It helps both the business owner and the employee understand where they stand. What is the rule? How is that process supposed to roll, et cetera? Who should they contact? And then out of that, a lot of other, critical items roll out. In terms of, what are your critical response systems? If, inclement weather is the one that does happen quite frequently, and many companies have that, but, beefing that up a little bit. You mentioned the organizational chart. Okay. Well, off of that, you can build, a call tree of how to, if something does come up, how do we need to respond to it and respond to it effectively, and not react, but respond proactively to it. Defining jobs, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we progress, because that can lead into, as far as setting expectations as employees went to work from home, understanding what it is that they actually should be doing and how we need to be holding them accountable, but also those job descriptions can help us understand any kind of ADA accommodations. So I'm also dealing with that quite heavily right now as employees are asked to come back to work. And then, taking a look at, your processes that you have, or lack thereof a lot of times. How are you recruiting people? How are you onboarding them? How are you training them? And then how are you managing their performance?
So if could I summarize it by saying this, Sarah, sure, that you're basically trying to document how your employees are to work or what's expected of them. Is that a fair way to say it?
Absolutely. And I try to relate it in terms of, building a house. Okay. If anybody has ever been a part of building a house or owns a house yourself, you understand how important that infrastructure is, that foundation, and the framing that goes into it, and how that translates out to everything else that either goes right or goes wrong with your house.
So I've heard, let me just kind of repeat what I just heard. I was taking some mental notes over here. So forgive me if I miss one, folks. I'm sure our listener audience never forgets anything as somebody's rattling off a list, but here we go. You mentioned a employee manual. You mentioned job descriptions. You mentioned a business continuity plan. That disaster plan, I think, is exactly what you stated. You talked about the recruitment. So that's how you hire people. How I'm assuming you would also deal with how you fire people. You would probably have corrective procedures. You would have policies. There'd be codes of ethics, depending on what type of business you're in. So you're basically just trying to document the processes to which people are to abide by within the organization. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's make the assumption then that business owners have all those things buttoned up, which, by the way, no one ever does. But I hope that comes through on the microphone as I put my face in this thing, but no one ever has it buttoned up. Okay. Yours truly included, by the way. I have some holes in my systems. In fact, Sarah's going to, if I were to say, she's like, just shame, 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 Justin, shame, shame, shame. You're not supposed to have these holes. So I don't know of a business owner who has it all buttoned up, period, because it's an ever moving target. I mean, it's like once you get it fixed, Congress changes something, some sort of a litigation issue or a ruling from a judge changes something, and now you got to constantly keep it moving. So I love the idea of a seat at the table. But as we move forward, this timeline, Sarah, February 19th was like a rock star day. The stock market's at an all-time high. The economy's cruising. Everybody's now demanding higher wages. I mean, we're talking about minimum wage issues in our country. And lo and behold, the very next day, it starts a rapid slide. I mean, like my little child sliding down the slide at the park. I mean, it's just hit hard. And all of a sudden, we find ourselves with 42 million Americans unemployed. For the first time ever, business owners able to file for unemployment to try to survive this. We had loans issued by the government. My goodness, Sarah, from an HR perspective, what did you see as the most common points of frustration or the most common points of risk that business owners were dealing with during this time of COVID?
So, of course, a lot of conversations began with, I've never been faced with this, of course. And it seems like, well, especially for non-essential businesses, that we may have to be, or we may be forced with the decision to lay off or furlough employees simply because, the government has said we cannot operate. And, or if they are essential, that, the business dropped off enough that they just can't, continue to employ everybody that they once did. Learning how to manage employees that were then working from home that had never worked from home before. And that, the things that came with that are, of course, technical issues, not planning ahead for that and having the capabilities probably in place to be able to handle that and handle it effectively. Trying to figure out ways to communicate with these folks that once you could, at one point, you could go into their office and ask them a question at any point of the day, anytime you wanted to. Now, these people are working from home and have children at home and other distractions that may prevent them from being readily available. And then, of course, we've already touched on this a little bit, but how to provide that clarity and manage the expectations of those employees as they're working from home. And then, the other things that would come up is how to effectively lead through a time like this versus letting it drag you along and just reacting to each stage of this crisis. Those were the things that.
Whenever I was personally dealing with this as a business owner, I got to tell you, I got not scared, but a little bit. It got to be a little bit surreal for me for a second. So in our business, we had prepared, not as good as we should have, obviously, as many people, because we were testing it for the first time. We had prepared for remote communication. We had internet-based channels that we could chat through that are regulatory approved for our industry. We had job descriptions we were already doing the cross-training position at that point. We had kind of knew what we all could do, and we started cross-training in case somebody wasn't there. So we had done some of that. We had been writing out job descriptions, and now we're getting ready to solidify those. We had processes so that if you could see where every case or every client was in the process, so that somebody for sickness or a child or whatever came about. I think we married to that. The one thing that got me though, Sarah, I got to tell you, was the actual laptop. So in my world, I can't send people home because of the securities world. I can't send people home to use a special computer. They have to have a computer that we have regulations and all these different things on. Mm-hmm. So whenever this hit, there was about 2 laptops in the office. Everything else was desktops. And now we're getting ready to send people home. And we were a necessity business, right? But we had people whose family members weren't at home. They had kids at home, and one spouse was going crazy, like, "Hey, you got to get some help." So we made this rule we're going to send a group of people home and test it while we're trying to get laptops in. And we couldn't get enough laptops for everybody. It was really interesting because at that time it was a high demand. So here we are with a couple individuals who had no access whatsoever. And basically they just got paid to sit at home during this time period. Sarah, I would have never in my life dreamed that would have been the case. I'm certain you saw other things like that during this time period.
Absolutely. Or in instances where, I had a couple of clients that were deemed essential, had to remain open. They had to cut back here and there, hours, etc., open to the public. So they started trying to stagger schedules, and then what they did is they created teams of employees that worked together. So that would help minimize the risk of exposure. So not everybody in the whole workforce would be exposed, hopefully. And so staggering their schedules, doing a thorough cleaning between, the scheduling for each one of those groups of employees. But that resulted in a lot of employees, as you mentioned, sitting at home because they couldn't perform their duties. Their duties were service oriented. They had, to perform that while on site on the premises. And so, that was pretty uncomfortable, those conversations with business owners, in that, how, I'm paying people that aren't necessarily working, and, I'm okay with that, but I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
And, what can we do? And then the FFCRA came along and further, provide us more guidance, but maybe further complicated things to a degree.
So that's for an acronym. FFCRA is?
The Families First Coronavirus Act.
That's right. Yeah, and that we spent some time talking about that on the show. We actually had one of our attorneys out of the Boston area come in and dissect that. But for those of you who aren't familiar with that acronym, that was the Families First, is what it was kind of dubbed as. That came in and gave us some guidance on how we're supposed to deal with people, or the lack thereof. And we were trying to shoot in the dark, and we were trying to get attorneys to give us guidance. And they're like, dude, we have no idea behind the air. And on the air, they sounded like they knew what they're talking about. And then off the air, they're like, dude, this is the best interpretation we have. We have no idea. Then you had, after the FF, then you had in the CARES Act that came in. And so now you had business owners who had to pay employees who couldn't work because they had to get the forgiveness side. And so, I mean, I know I personally dealt with that with a couple of our employees, that they were getting paid to do nothing. Okay. And it's like, oh, that my work ethic was like, Sarah, I grew up on a farm, right? I grew up learning how to work hard. And it's like, you don't get paid to do nothing. So, and I know the employee side, they were just as frustrated as the owners were. I know that, because people honestly want to do a good job. I really believe that within my person. So out of COVID, what do you see changing for us business owners in this world of HR going forward?
Well, I hope we're out of COVID. Let me say that first. I guess that remains to be seen. I hope we're learning from the fact that we may not have responded as well, as quickly, or the ways that we wish we would have, and take the time that we do have now to change that, to better prepare, build that foundation, whatever that might look like for employers, and get ready, because I'm not sure that normal is what it was before COVID. I just don't think it's going to be what it was, good, bad, or indifferent. But, in transitioning employees back to the workplace, and, preparing to be fully open and engaged in the work that you do, making sure that you don't forget about the feelings of the employees that are working there. Continuing to take that time to listen to them, to empathize with their side of things, their situation, and review and adjust as you move forward, especially as we enter in to the fall, when there's a lot of employees that do have children, school-age children, and that has yet to be determined as to how that they are going to be handling schooling in the fall and going forward. So, we may see ourselves back in similar situations, and allowing employees to continue to work from home, or go back to working from home, or making changes to the job that they are performing for the company so they can continue to work.
So as I have you on the phone, so I'll have you on the video today, Sarah, there's a lot of questions on that last sentence that you just described that come up, and that is making changes to the job. So they can continue employment. I got to tell you, Sarah, hundreds of owners I've had the opportunity to speak with in the last 3 months, the idea of laying somebody off just ate at the business owners. And I know oftentimes the employers get a bad rap. They're the greedy business owner who always, man, I watched them turmoil, their face, stress, sickness coming from trying to deal with employees. Then now they're trying to get team members to come back because of various parts of the country, you know, that's not there quite yet. The way that the CARES Act changed the unemployment numbers, kind of decentivized people from coming in and working again. But one of the things I keep hearing is this. So, Justin, look, dude, I've got this employee over here that they just can't get happy. They were sent them home for 6 weeks. They got used to working from home. We didn't have the productivity we needed because they didn't have the, whatever it is, the office environment, the workplace environment. Productivity fell. I got to tell you, if I were sitting at home, I would not be able to produce at the same level, candidly. But productivity fell. And now they're back in the office and they're just disgruntled. They're just not happy. It's not what it was for the last 6 weeks. Fear's in there. I mean, we all are kind of scared right now in the sense of when's it going to come back? Are we out of it? Election years never help us and all the emotions that come through. But, you know, we're kind of scared right now. But I've got to deal with some behavioral issues. I'm coming back and I got people being late to work. There's no excuse for it. I've got people come back and now they're, I've heard that a couple of times this last little bit. I've heard all they want to do is now they just want to take the laptop and work from home on a regular basis. And I got to have them in the office. How would you give advice with that as a kind of a backdrop question or platform? How would you give advice to a business owner who's sitting here trying to do the best they can to serve their customer, patient, whatever, while at the same time the team is doing the best they can to live candidly and to deal with their families and their children and all the circumstances you have? How do you advise the business owner through these times when they're trying to say, man, do I write them up? Do I just let it slide? Do I adjust something? Do I hold true to my manual? Do I not? Does that make sense? My series of questions there?
Sure, absolutely. I really feel like it starts with on an individual basis. So, you know, dealing with the individual that you are having a specific issue with or challenge with, and sitting down and have a conversation, try to understand where it's coming from. Especially because what employers might find is that they may be dealing with a real disability accommodation situation. So that they may not have been privy to prior. And so what I mean by that is an employee may be acting in an adverse manner because they are truly worried about reintegrating into the workforce because of the underlying health condition. For those of you all that are not familiar with the ADA or Americans with Disability Act and then the amendment to it as well, it is quite broad as far as what classifies as an actual disability, but something that substantially limits this employee's functionality in life or in the workplace. And that can be, further complicated by, situations like this pandemic. And so just to provide some clarity on that, depression and anxiety are included in the Americans with Disability Act. And so what that means is that an employee truly could be having an adverse reaction to reintegrating into the workplace due to anxiety or depression that they battle personally. And so, like I said, starting those conversations individually to understand where it's truly coming from and whether or not you have, a possible disability accommodation on your hands, which, leads to an actual process through which you need to work with that employee to accommodate them, or to see if there is a reasonable accommodation, I should say. But if it's not something in that vein, that it's just sort of a, I want to work from home and you won't let me work from home, it then becomes a conversation based on that job description that you've had and performance measures that you have in place. And so, having that dialogue with the employee, this is what you were hired to do. While certain aspects of that you can perform effectively while you're at home, it was demonstrated over the course of X months that these other pieces were not performed effectively, and thus impacted your performance in a negative way. And ultimately, as a business, we have to run effectively. We have to be productive in our roles. And so it's been shown to us that you're going to be best or be most productive in your role if you are in the office and have resources available to you that you don't have at home, have the coaching that you need to be able to be successful in your role, whatever the case may be. And so having those conversations individually and then having conversations within your teams, and having candid dialogue and really, stepping out of those conversations as a business owner a lot of times and allowing there to be dialogue and taking a listening and learning approach in order to understand maybe there truly are areas in which we can adapt our business model and maybe allow work from home from time to time, right? Is there some type of a concession there or not? So, having that dialogue, not being afraid to engage in those discussions, both individually and as a group.
So we've heard so far, friends, that pre-COVID, we should have had certain documents in place. And if you don't have the documents in place, then I'm going to tell you that someone like Sarah through Results HR can help you document your processes. Maybe you're in a different state in our union, and we've got offices in Philadelphia and Boston, and those are two different, radically different states in our East Tennessee culture, and they have different rules. So you've got to have some documentation in place that we talked about. And then during COVID, we all were kind of flying by the seat of our pants, doing the best we could. And I think there was tolerance that I saw with all of our clients from the business owner's perspective and from the employee's perspective, realizing these were unprecedented times. And we just did the best we could to stay on the boat, so to speak, right, Sarah? During that time, just did everything we could to stay on the boat. Well, now we're coming, hopefully, Lord willing, we're coming out of this COVID cycle. Hopefully, we'll see. We may not be out of it, but we're starting to at least feel that way. And maybe it's the familiarity of the springtime flowers or some of the protests we've seen where people are now gathering together in large groups, kind of relate that we can get life back to normal maybe. Man, we now are trying to figure out how we're going to modify our business. Sarah, I'm going to ask you a hard question. I'm going to warn you in advance. With what's happening in our country on the race relations, I'm sure that is a particular issue that you've dealt with in your business and through your manuals and everything. What hope can we business owners do as the captains of our respective ships? What hope can we do, or what hope can we provide, or what values can we implement through the documentation to try to prevent this evil called racism from coming into our businesses?
Well, I tell you what, I really love this initiative of the listening and learning. And I think that's one of the absolute best things that we can do is to pause our thoughts on these matters and really listen to those voices that are really trying to help us understand where they're coming from. I've been fortunate to be able to be a part of a couple of organizations that serve minority businesses or people in our area and minority populations. And I've had an opportunity to listen to those folks myself. So it's one thing to listen to these voices on TV and social media, et cetera. And that's great if that's all that you can engage in. But I would challenge everybody to take the opportunity to go listen to these individuals themselves, to get it, immerse yourself in their environment and try to understand where they're coming from. Throughout my time in human resources, diversity has been something that I've been very passionate about because I have seen what a wonderful impact it makes on everybody personally, but also on the organization, the business, when you have diverse mindsets and diverse experiences to bring to the table. And I feel like it starts there, that you welcome those individuals into your business, either as employees, which is fantastic, but as maybe customers or clients. And I just feel like we all just have a lot to learn. And that starts with that, like I said, that listening, that openness to those voices.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I believe in diversity of gender, a diversity of skill sets, a diversity of values, a diversity of a lot of things. In fact, many people may know this. My wife is actually biracial. She has an Asian mother and a European father. And so it's interesting some of the things that we've dealt with and dealing with racism in a family unit. So it's one of those things that near dear to my heart. Even though I grew up in the deep South, wasn't trained to be racist. I don't understand it. I think God created all of us beautifully. I just love the fact that we can document things on how our values, how we want to run our values of our company and documents as it relates to this issue that's now before us as we record this called racism. So I love that. I love that insight there, Sarah. Let me ask you one last question. If I were to hold you down, pin you down today, and I said, Sarah, I need one particular pearl of wisdom, knowing your background and all the knowledge and all these years experience that you have as it relates to HR and looking at the world of business, the many business owners that you consult with today. And I could just say, Sarah, you only have one chance to give one pearl of wisdom. What would that be?
That's a great question. And I would just have to say, as painful as it can be or is for business owners, is to take the time necessary to create that foundation that we talked about. When you do that, that allows you to function much more effectively, proactively, etc., and allows you to be more strategic, to be able to be in a position, in a place that you can respond versus react to situations, whatever that may be, now or in the future. Is taking that time to build that foundation, that structure within your organization.
So you've been listening to Sarah Alexander, owner and consultant of Results HR today, an East Tennessee-based consulting firm for HR services. Sarah, I'd love to have you back on the show to ask you one question about how do you fire somebody properly? That's often a question I get. I'd love to walk through that with you one day. I know that's an easy topic to talk through. Maybe we could do that as a follow-up conversation. But for those listening today, as we're dealing with HR in the midst of COVID, if somebody had a follow-up question for you and they said, I'd love to get some HR guidance on this, how would you direct people to reach out to you?
Oh, they can reach out directly to me by email or phone. Email address is Sarah, SARAH.Alexander @results-hr.com, and or by phone 865-679-1980.
Sarah, thank you so much for being on the show today. What we're going to do is we're going to put a link, friends, for Sarah's contact information, her website, her phone number. I might not put your email in there for pirating reasons, so somebody doesn't like spam you on your email, because that gets nasty real quick. But we'll put all those information down into the show notes. And so, look, I've known of Sarah for many years. In fact, whenever we got on today, I was like, I know you from somewhere, Sarah. We were kind of chatting, trying to figure out where our paths have crossed. I've known of her for years. I know she has a solid reputation in the world of HR. She's got the credentials to back it up, and I'm just honored to spend a little bit of time with us today, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me as a guest.
So look, friends, life is hard. It is. Life is hard, but life is good. The sun arose this morning. It's going to rise tomorrow. I don't care what happens. Unless Jesus comes back, the sun's going to be up tomorrow. Life is hard. Life is good. Life can be frustrating. Yeah, this is the world of HR. My goodness, it frustrates me to no end. It really does. It's not my strong suit. We have a president of our company who's fixing to be announced that's going to take care of all this stuff for me, so I don't have to think about this anymore. And he's going to tell me all the things I'm doing wrong, by the way. So life can be frustrating. Money doesn't have to be. We're going to continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, y'all stay tuned to the next time. We have an awesome guest on the show. Until then, y'all go out and make it a great day. You got to make it. It's not going to happen unless you do it. Take care, friends.